Treasury says there will be no cuts to health and education. Manam ashfall resumes after a quiet week. And the success of a backyard Taekwondo club in East New Britain.
This is National MTV News with Tokana Hasavi.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Friday's News. It's good to have your company again. The Papua New Guinea government will be introducing budget cuts in response to falling mineral and petroleum prices, as well as a predicted general downturn in the economy. But Treasurer Patrick Pruitt says the cuts won't detract from government's policies of education, health and district development. Similar sentiments have been shared by other members of the government as well as the parliament. The responses come against a backdrop of predictions that this impending crisis could be worse than what PNG experienced in the 1990s.
Over the last 7 days, the government's been hammered over the state of the economy. Analysts predicting an economic downturn far worse than the 1990s and that of the turn of the century suggested drastic measures to cut costs. Overseas, the predicted meltdown is being likened to that of the Greek economy. Treasury released a statement late yesterday pointing out yet again what many stakeholders already knew, that a drop in oil prices is hitting PNG hard in the pockets and that the shutdown of Octedi, one of our biggest revenue earners, is also impacting on the budget projections. The opposition has leveled several accusations against the government, including the loss of financial discipline and the failure to reform state-owned enterprises like PNG Power. The government, meanwhile, is saying in so many words, the situation is manageable. The Treasury says budget cuts will be made, but the government still hasn't said where the cuts will be made. But we do know at least those cuts won't affect education, health and funding to the districts. The government's hit back at the opposition and analysts that the reductions can't be done in a way that affects the momentum of growth. Now, a supplementary budget is now inevitable, but it'll also be interesting to see how the government will deal with wastages in the state-owned enterprises and the large, cumbersome public service that consumes a lot in recurrent expenditure. Now, the funding to districts will be maintained, but when they get the money dependent on cash flow is another matter altogether. The government's also expected to live up to its legal obligations of debt servicing. Scott Waide, National MTV News.
A planned signing agreement for a large oil palm project has been deferred to a later date. Due to technical issues, the signing of the heads of agreements for the Sepik Plains oil palm project could not happen today. The government is intending to partner Malaysian investor Kuala Lumpur Kepong or KLK to begin feasibility studies for a large-scale oil palm project in the East Sepik Plains of East Sepik Province.
For Trade, Commerce and Industry, Richard Maru was at the Government House today, ready for the signing of the heads of agreement for the Sepik Plains oil palm project. Also present were members of the investment company Kuala Lumpur Kepong or KLK and other stakeholders. The morning signing was, however, postponed to the afternoon. And in the afternoon, the parties were again advised that the papers were not in order. The signing was further postponed to a later date. If the signing agreement goes ahead, the oil palm project will be one of the many agriculture projects that will be developed in the Sepik Plains Economic Zone. KLK will also develop an environmental plan for the project. KLK is one of the largest integrated oil palm companies in the world and has been in operation for over 100 years. Minister Maru said the Sepik Plains Economic Zone project and the Frida copper mine projects will be catalysts for the development of a new major international wharf in Wewak, and it will also justify the expansion of the Boram Airport. Deli Waigeno, National MTV News.
The Manam volcano in Madang has begun spewing ash again a week after the volcanic activity injured a 17-year-old boy. Our Madang correspondent, Rachel Shise, spent the last 2 days on Manam speaking to islanders, some of whom have remained displaced since the 1996 and 2004 eruptions.
The effect of this eruption on the people is contaminated cooking and drinking water, and all their garden food burnt by the dust, which was said to be hot when it first came out. The food on the island may look green on the outside, but burnt on the inside. The islanders are currently living on breadfruits for food and coconuts for water, estimated to run out by next week.
Long play dry season come na. Time Manam fire come down here. Garden all get bagarap. Wara mi plus so dry season come na. This time Manam one dust come down here. All get a wara blow mi plus bagarap. Mi plus mainly wara mi plus a kisim. Mi plus kisim inside all creek. Namel all creek blow all big plabar blow mi plus a kisi wara long. Lucky osem. Island blow mi play good plan. Mi plus at lily wara mix wara mi plus kisim arelo nambis. Sebi mi plus one time. It's a time where EMTV go bagara volgeta sol wara volgeta tasol iga lili half time when mi plus akisim this la wara sa help mi pla.
Meanwhile, the little boy from Baliao village, who was hurt when he got hit by the volcano throwing stones last Friday, has recovered.
Friday, 20.
Mi plus taplo school at 10 o'clock ya. Mi plus outside na paya kira na muklo noise na mi plara. Ran go back close to mi plus go back close to house na santi kama. Close to mila gonchait lo house na slap stone countdown by dinamite.
The thickness of the ashes last Friday is measured to be 5 centimeters from the ground, and after the spewing from the volcano this morning, the thickness is likely to have more than doubled. The men, women and children of Manam Island are in dire need of relief supplies and immediate relocation. Rachel Shise, National EMTV News, Madang.
This year, Madang province has seen at least 2 major armed robberies, 1 kidnapping and several brutal murders, all in a space of several months. Petty crime has become so rampant that residents have lost confidence in government systems. The crime has been attributed primarily to the influx of people in the last 3 years, the rapid growth of illegal settlements and high unemployment. While that's happening in the background, police are outnumbered and their long-standing housing issue that we've been covering over 3 years still has not been resolved. EMTV's Bethany Harriman reports from Madang.
When we arrived at the barracks, the wives of the policemen didn't want to speak to us about the state of their homes. They say it isn't the first time that people have brought cameras into the barracks to capture how they live.
Maybe that's the last time we are talking to the media, and it won't be happen again. So we want the authorities to listen to us and please do something to us because we have kids growing up. And we are changing more.
Mariatha Sui, the wife of a senior constable, says on numerous occasions they have spoken out. Today, the wives of the policemen showed problems they had already brought to attention in the last 2 years. The deteriorating state of their toilets, showers and kitchen. The housing they live in continue to crumble around them. Most of them have been condemned and deemed unfit to live in. But the families have been maintaining what they can and continue to live in them.
But I think that the government has to do something for us police officers to live in good places, to carry out investigations, because at the moment we don't have any security wise around so that we can look after our families. I don't think that this is insecure.
Senior Constable Michael Jingap's family has been living here for over 10 years. He has been a police officer for the last 23 years. His wife shows how the house has been falling apart, and they have been keeping it together by spending their own money on maintenance. Madang town is experiencing economic growth in the resource sector. Now that means an influx of people coming into the province. The Manam police are facing similar problems faced by all policemen around the country, containing law and order problems amidst logistic problems and manpower shortages caused by a chronic housing problem faced by other policemen and women around the country. Bethany Harriman, National EMTV News, Manam.
New Britain Highway needs more funding. Also, housing scheme for nurses, and NRI raises doubts on the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We'll give you the details when we come back. Stay with us. Thanks for your company and welcome back to the news. Over 7 houses at Danwaya at 4 Mile here in Port Moresby were destroyed this afternoon following what settlers described as forced eviction. Settlers say they have proper land titles to the land. However, an Asian company is claiming the land for development. EMTV Stanley Ovett Jr. has more in this report.
This is a forced eviction ordered by the state to remove over 7 houses. What the settlers here don't understand is that there was no formal eviction notice given to them prior to the forced eviction. This mother told EMTV News that she has been living here for over 30 years with proper land titles. Another retired public servant, Tony Kagel, said despite having proof that the land was titled to them, an Asian company has pushed for the land to be developed, resulting in the eviction and destruction of houses and properties.
I don't know why there is someone here who came by surprise and tried to evict me. I am Tony Kagel, I am the title holder here right now.
During the week, the Lands Department issued a stern warning to people who reside illegally on state land to voluntarily vacate the land.
If a developer comes in there or these 2 title holders come in there, they are likely to evict them.
But what the settlers want answers for is how the land title for the Danwaya area at 4 Mile was given to the Asian company when the settlers had documents to prove they were mandated land owners.
Now people are starting here. Who's eviction? Who initiated eviction? Are you going to promote interest of foreigners or our interest? This is our land.
Stanley Ovett Jr., National EMTV News.
The East New Britain Provincial Government says the New Britain Highway between East and West New Britain provinces will need more funding. At least 2 new bridges will have to be built over the Toriu and Pandi rivers. Although the highway is taking shape, sections between Open Bay and Ulamona remain dangerous for the travelling public. Our Kokopo correspondent Edwin Fidelis, who travelled with a police contingent to Kimbe, has this story.
The New Britain Highway is remote and isolated. It cuts through the Nakanai Range and the inland Baining Peninsula in East New Britain Province. Only a few people have crossed over on vehicles successfully from Kokopo to West New Britain Province. The trip to Kimbe from Kokopo requires a 10-hour journey on a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and the journey is not always comfortable. This is the Pandi River, the last leg of the Kokopo to Kimbe trip, before crossing over to Ulamona in West New Britain Province. This trip was organized by the Kokopo Police on Wednesday this week to assess and evaluate the condition of the new highway, and amongst them was the East New Britain Governor Eramanto Baining Jr., who says he will report on the state of the highway to the government.
In 2016 and 17 now by national funding long national government by Kamlo over 300 million long Steratim Road Union now long national highway along East and West New Britain.
While the highway is slowly taking shape, the East New Britain Governor says he will ask for more funding from the 2016 national budget to complete the New Britain Highway.
This is one of the highways, just like all the highways here in Papua New Guinea, and it is the government's priority for this road, the highway. So by 2016, we should have a full construction and final touching on the highway.
The highway is expected to be completed in 2017. Once completed, it will be the main link connecting East and West New Britain provinces for the first time in many years. Edwin Fidelis, National EMTV News, Kokopo.
The Duran Farm Housing Project, headed by the National Housing Corporation, will build over 200 homes for the PNG Nurses Association members. This was facilitated by the No. 1 Super Limited through the members' savings, which guarantees security to obtain loans from the bank to build their houses. MTV's Eric Harupma with this report.
The National Housing Corporation Community Policing, Marketing and Investment Manager Wayne Boy said 200 nurses have qualified for this new housing scheme. He said, however, from the 200 applicants considered, only 145 names were approved to obtain bank loans, while others are awaiting clearance from the bank. Those qualified under the scheme will have to pay about 500 kina per fortnight for the period of 25 years. The cost of this residential apartment is 250,000 kina, including the land.
The corporation has been managing the current stock of houses which were previously built by the government.
BSP conveyance lawyer Ebed Best Wali, upon signing the MOU on behalf of BSP, said the bank will lend 90% of the loan to its PNG-NA clients, given their 10% NES Fund savings contribution.
Payments for paying housing corporation conveyancing fees, the lawyer's fee and the Lands Department Minister's approval fee.
PNG Nurses Association President Amy Kaptigau said this project is a dream come true for all the nurses as they have been facing accommodation problem. PNG-NA is the first association in the country to take this initiative, whilst working closely with stakeholders NHE and No. 1 Super Limited in taking this great initiative to ease the housing problem in the city. Eric Arupma, National MTV News.
Agriculture Minister Tommy Tomskol has questioned the whereabouts of 40 million kina allocated for the Agriculture Commercialisation Equity Fund in 2014. The minister made the remarks on day 2 of the Agriculture Forum here in Port Moresby yesterday.
The Agriculture Department's Functional Expenditure Review Unit has worked to simplify funding complexities within the department, establishing 2 main bodies and amending legislation and functions. This came after the government's 40 million kina allocation in the 2014 budget never came through. Funding through this year's budget was similar.
One of the issues we may consider may be, do we need to completely deregulate the industry? That's the kind of talking we should be talking. Yeah, we're not getting, we need 10%, we're not getting, we've been getting less than 2. What do we do to go from here? Do we deregulate this industry totally and allow the private sector to drive the sector? Or do we semi-deregulate it? These are solutions we need to do. We need to start thinking outside of that box.
The agriculture sector is basically running on survival mode, receiving only 2% of the total budget. In order to implement any changes to boost the sector in the export market, more government investment is needed, as well as collaboration with other government departments, such as the Department of Implementation and Rural Development. Leaders pointed out agriculture's 2 billion kina contribution to the economy and its direct benefits to the farmers on the ground. Commodity boards were urged to be innovative in the wake of limited funding, as the department continues to pursue consistent funding to build on the country's prospective agriculture sector. Alana Lay, National MTV News.
An Australian and New Zealand-backed agriculture program is now backing Nakia in efforts to assist PNG exporters meet world import standards. The Pacific Horticultural and Agricultural Market Access Program previously described PNG as a no-go zone. The announcement comes as Nakia is looking to modernize its services, but it also needs more scientists and funding to make any tangible change to PNG's export industry.
Modernization program is a very important program because we need to have data information on export and imports. If there are, goods coming into our country, we need to have the data. We don't have that. So the modernization program, the modernization concept that we develop, we feel that we think that we can address that.
Well, there are doubts to how funds will be put into the Sovereign Wealth Fund or SWF. NRI Director Dr. Charles Yala said from the first SWF bill report, revenues will be directed to SOEs before being put into the SWF. He said from their consultation with the Public Parliamentary Committee earlier this year, they have made submissions to change these funds distribution criteria.
The National Research Institute has been on the front line in the draw-up of PNG's Sovereign Wealth Fund for the last 2 years. Being the only organization to submit recommendations to the Public Parliamentary Committee on the draw-up of the Wealth Fund, NRI questioned the structure of the SWF and the two types of funds in its component. NRI Director Dr. Charles Yala said that third component of infrastructure funds must be added to the current two, which are the Stabilization and Savings Fund. The biggest doubt NRI has is on the distribution of funds into the Sovereign Wealth Fund. From NRI's consultation with the Public Parliamentary Committee, the first bill stated that funds will be diverted to state-owned entities before being put into the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
We are not comfortable with that structure. That the funds go to the SOEs like Petromine and National Petroleum Corporation and all the state-owned enterprises. Then it goes to the Sovereign Wealth Fund. It defeats the whole purpose.
Earlier this week, INA Director Paul Baker said the SWF must not be manipulated. He said the government must manage the SWF with the highest level of governance and principles. Baker also adds the government to cut down on borrowing, which in the long run will affect the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
So it's important that it is hands-off, it's managed, the stabilization is managed according to its formula, and that the savings fund is not just sort of used on an ad hoc way.
NRI is yet to make a report on the final SWF bill passed in Parliament last week, and Dr. Yala said the distribution criteria of the SWF must be well managed.
We have a distribution criteria on what proportion is going to futures, what proportion is going to stabilization, and what percentage is going to go to the budget process. It is through the budget process that the state-owned enterprises and everybody else can get their cut.
Stanley Over Jr., National EMTV News.
And now let's take a look at the finance news. The Kina closed unchanged at $0.3605 US in the interbank market. At Bank South Pacific, our Kina was trading at $0.3530 US, $0.478 Australian dollars, $0.3193 euro, and 43.61 Japanese yen. Looking at commodity prices at New York close, gold and copper closed the day lower, while coffee and cocoa closed the day higher. Palm oil and copper closed lower, while crude oil closed the day higher. And finally, on the stock market, the Dow Jones closed at 121 points lower, the ASX closed at 59 points higher, and the All Ordinaries closed at 63 points higher as well. Australian authorities say they have turned back 600 asylum seekers since setting up detention centres in PNG and Nauru. That story and more coming up after this break. Stay with us. Good to have you back with National EMTV News. Well, 600 asylum seekers have been turned away since the governments of Australia and Papua New Guinea agreed to the regional resettlement arrangements in 2013. Australia's Immigration Minister Peter Dutton revealed this, saying over the course of 18 months, 20 boats were turned back. Despite being criticised by the United Nations and human rights groups over human rights breaches, which include a media blackout and the sanctioning of medical information, both governments have remained committed to upholding their turn back the boats policy. MTV's Alana Lay has this report.
Around the world, the scenes remain the same. Hundreds of migrants are losing their lives, making the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean to reach Europe and escape the unrest and danger of their home countries. In Australia, however, leaders are celebrating the outcome of their hardline approach to refugees.
The fact that today we celebrate that we have not had a successful people smuggling venture in a year, and that over the course of the last 18 months or so we've turned back 20 boats and stopped 633 people from arriving in our country is a significant achievement of the Abbott government.
Australia works alongside respective governments to support the policy, including Vietnam, on a case-by-case basis. Under Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott's leadership, only 25 Rohingya refugees have been accepted.
We have a very clear policy in place, and that is that people who seek to come to our country by boat illegally will not settle in our country. And so we have worked on a bilateral basis with the Vietnamese government. Those 46 people have been returned. The boat that they came on has been scuttled, and we have been able to stare down that venture.
Human rights advocates have been in an uproar over the policy's secrecy, including the recent sanctioning of all medical information coming out of the Australian-run detention centres. The most recent of these have been 67 child abuse allegations at the Nauru detention centre, including a child asylum seeker who was seeking medical treatment after being raped by a fellow detainee. Problems at the Manus detention centre have also raised concerns in the country, with the Prime Minister and Police Minister calling for investigations into the rape of a local woman by suspected Australian guards. Meanwhile, Manus MP Ronnie Knight has called for the asylum centre to be shut down. Alana Lay, EMTV World News.
After 515 days of searching for flight MH370, a wing fragment was found last week on the French island of Reunion in the Indian Ocean. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak confirmed the fragment as part of the missing plane that went off the radar with 239 passengers in March 2014. But distressed and angry relatives of the victims of MH370 don't believe that the fragment belongs to MH370. They believe that the Malaysian government is hiding the truth. This was the announcement made yesterday morning by Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak.
It is with a very heavy heart that I must tell you that an international team of experts have conclusively confirmed that the aircraft debris found on Reunion Island is indeed from MH370.
But outside the Beijing office of Malaysia Airlines, angry relatives refusing to accept the announcement say it's all a hoax. Zhang Meiling, whose daughter was on the flight, says she will only accept the death of her daughter if her body is found.
What does such a tiny piece of debris mean regarding a 230-ton plane? Why are they trying to fool us? What's their purpose? To make us take the compensation money? We will definitely not accept it.
Other angry relatives stormed into the Malaysia Airlines Beijing office demanding for more information. This woman, evidently unhappy with the airline, refused to accept the announcement. Despite confirmation from Malaysia's Prime Minister that the wing piece belongs to the missing MH370, these Chinese relatives say the truth has been hidden by Malaysia Airlines and the Malaysian government.
Next step, we are going to ask the Malaysian government and Malaysia Airlines to assist us to go to Reunion Island in France. We will go to the site to check it out by ourselves. We don't believe any of their words, which are all lies.
A couple of Malaysians say the government needs to do more.
I was upset because of so long time taken.
The government should find more debris, but not only the flag parang. There's so many other objects that could be a proof. For example, Malaysia Airlines logo or the stripes on the aircraft body.
The announcement by the Malaysian Prime Minister provides the first direct evidence that the plane crashed in the ocean, but still gives families of the 239 victims little clue as to how and why. Meanwhile, prosecutors in France stopped short of declaring they were certain, saying only that there was a very strong presumption. Meanwhile, Australian Deputy Prime Minister Warren Truss says there is only a small element of doubt that the wing piece belongs to flight MH370.
We have been moving for quite some time to a position where it's quite clear that the evidence is mounting that this wreckage is associated with the flight MH370. We know for certain that the wreckage comes from a Boeing 777. That this part does not fit any other aircraft. We're aware that the manufacture time is about consistent with when the aircraft operating MH370 was actually constructed. But of course there are still some I's not dotted and T's not crossed. There is a still very small element of doubt. The French are being more cautious, but from the Malaysians, the flag carriers of the aircraft, they are now satisfied that the body of evidence is sufficient to say that this is wreckage from MH370.
You're watching National EMTV News tonight. We have a big lineup in sports. Our swimmers impressive at the FINA Championships Also, draws released for the Oceania Rugby Cup and more. Stay tuned, that's coming up next in True Guy Sports.
True Guy Sports.
Welcome to True Guy Sports. Well, Papua New Guinea made history in the pool on day 4 at the World Aquatics Championships when they came first ahead of 7 other countries in Heat 2 of the mixed 4x100 meter medley relay. They did not make it to the finals, but are now ranked 19th in the world. The relay team of Ryan Pinney, Tegan McCarthy, Sam Segis and Barbara Valley-Skelton broke their Oceania Championship record. Ryan Pinney got the team off to a great start and putting them in the lead. Tegan followed up with a great breaststroke. Segis had an impressive third leg of butterfly, and Barbara brought the team home in a new national record of 4 minutes and 13.9 seconds. Congratulations to them all. Well, Oceania Rugby and the PNG Rugby Football Union have announced the tournament dates for the 2015 Oceania Cup. Solomon Islands will take on Cup debutants American Samoa, while Papua New Guinea will face Tahiti on Saturday, the 22nd of August. The tournament will be held at the Sir Hubert Murray Stadium in Port Moresby.
The PNG Pukpuks have a good chance to reclaim the title as the Oceania champions in 2015 after defending champs Cook Islands have not confirmed their participation in this year's tournament. Solomon Islands, Tahiti and American Samoa are among the 4 nations to compete alongside Papua New Guinea from the 22nd to the 30th of August at the Sir Hubert Murray Stadium in Port Moresby. Pukpuks coach Sydney Wesley has confirmed an extended 32-man squad, which is to be trimmed down and finalised in the weeks leading into the tournament. Of the 32 men in the squad, 5 are Brisbane-based. The Kautu brothers, Jackie Marcus, James Lamaris, alongside 7 stars, Wesley Valley and Butler Morris will feature in this year's 15s team to add a bit of pace out wide.
Here's Varley. Wesley Varley won't beat the cover. Yes, he will. Wesley Varley's close. Varley's over. I didn't believe that he could get there. There were 3 Fijian defenders.
PNG won the Cup in 2009 and 2011 and placed second in 2013 when Cook Islands caused an upset in Port Moresby. The Pukpuks will take on Tahiti on Saturday the 22nd of August, American Samoa in Game 2 on Wednesday the 26th of August and Solomon Islands in their final game on Sunday the 30th of August. Lorraine Genia, National EMTV Sports.
In a backyard in Karavat in East New Britain Province, a 20-year-old Taekwondo academy trains small children the art of Taekwondo. A veteran Taekwondo practitioner, Bernard Wallown, trains his young students using an old punching bag filled with rags. Although small, the Taekwondo Academy has produced one of PNG's Taekwondo best, Raina Penny, who won silver in men's Taekwondo during the recent Pacific Games here in Port Moresby.
Bernard Wallown runs a Taekwondo school at his backyard in Karavat in the Gazelle district. The veteran Taekwondo practitioner is one of the very few Papua New Guineans who is still practicing this Korean art of self-defense. Every afternoon, small children and young adults in the neighborhood gathered at his house to attend at least an hour of training.
Me sabe tokimolos and time you like come training martial art and spark na drag na emtambo.
After almost 20 years and from a humble start, the training school had brought the level of Taekwondo in East New Britain Province to a new level. Despite limited resources, the students from this small academy have made it through 2 big sporting events.
Side belong club lo Karavat or Samipla alo side and Lande only representing Miss New Britain, only fight lo PNG game. And because me moldi molab lo time molli come on top so.
While many view Taekwondo as a sport, Wallown says it also involves self-discipline and helps its young students to be better citizens in the community.
Lo side blow masala tem discipline and big play. Osen mas discipline and be going inside lo ring and by good play fighter.
The former martial artist hasn't made his presence known in a big way, but his mentorship in this self-defense sport has been an outstanding one. About 5 students from this training ground has made it to numerous PNG games representing the East Nubitan provincial team. Not only that, one of them has won silver for Papua New Guinea in the recent Pacific Games in Port Moresby. The academy has already begun training to make up an East Nubitan Taekwondo team for the coming PNG Games in West Nubitan Province next year. Edwin Fidelis, National EMTV Sports.
After their outstanding performance at the Special Olympics, plans have been put into place for future training and more development programs for the athletes who competed. For now, the athletes will continue training in preparation for other tournaments. EMTV's Elijah Levet has more.
Some parents were also part of the team who went to the World Games. The idea was to get them involved with some special athletes programs such as the Family Network program and the Healthy Athletes program to teach them how to look after their child. President Takale Tuna said it is hard training an athlete with special needs. They plan to implement sub-programs in the different provinces to help the athletes keep fit.
We are trying to establish sub-programs in the provinces. Like Bougainville will already have an office over there, so that's the way that I'm thinking of exactly maintaining their fitness level. So when the next games comes around, they'll be ready.
Family plays an important role in the lives of these athletes. Mr. Tuna commended their tremendous support and encouraged them to continue.
Disability is the parents is a first point of call. You know, without them and their relatives and the siblings, these people can't come out. So they are very, very important in as far as Special Olympics programs are concerned. So we are happy that they are involved and will continue to involve them in the future.
Elijah Levet, National EMTV Sports.
Trukai Sports continues with a preview of the Intercity Cup, Friday night footy, soccer and cricket. Stay tuned for all that sporting action.
Trukai Sports.
Good to have you back with Trukai Sports. And in Rugby League, a point separates the top 3 teams in the Intercity Cup ladder. Last weekend, the Gurias, Lahanis and Wigmen registered marginal wins. In round 16 this Sunday, minor premiers Snacks Tigers will take on Mendimuruk's Inlay City. Hello Wigmen are still in the race to defend their title and will face competition favourites Gurias in Mendi. In Kundiawa, the Lahanis go head-to-head with Simbu Lions, while in Minj, Wagitumbe will face off with the Gulf Isapairs. And here in Port Moresby, the Port Moresby Vipers will take on Hagen Eagles. To NRL, the Broncos will be looking to redeem themselves following their shock thumping at the hands of the Manly Sea Eagles last weekend. Tonight, they take on the Canterbury Bulldogs, who currently sit 8th on the ladder, that's the points ladder, and are desperate for a win, while Manly will go head-to-head with South Sydney Rabbitohs. The Sea Eagles will go into tonight's match with much confidence following their huge victory over the Brisbane Broncos.
The Bunnies will be eager for a win to see them into the top 4 when they take on the Manly Sea Eagles later on tonight. The Sea Eagles will be coming into the match confident following their win over the top-of-the-table Brisbane Broncos last weekend.
Well, you make the most of your luck!
With the NRL finals approaching, both clubs will be just as hungry for a win.
Lovely play. Dylan Walker scores.
The Canterbury Bulldogs will be looking to bounce back following their disappointing loss at the hands of the Roosters last weekend when they faced the Brisbane Broncos. But the Broncos will be hard to beat as they will be looking to redeem themselves following their poor performance against the Sea Eagles.
That's another one to it. Corey Oates has lost it. It's picked up by Foran.
The Bulldogs, however, are 8th on the competition ladder and will need to win if they are to book a spot in the finals of the 2015 Premiership. Dion Kombang, National EMTV Sports.
Well, amidst the corruption scandal that has rocked the Federation International de Football Association, or FIFA, earlier this year, a glimpse of a positive outcome with the announcement that the organisation is creating reforms. As part of that reform, former International Olympic Committee Director General Francis Carrad has been approached by global soccer body FIFA to head its reform task force.
Carrad, who was IOC Director General from 1989 to 2003, brings a wealth of experience to the role, but hasn't confirmed his decision. FIFA, which had been engulfed by a corruption scandal, announced last month the creation of a new task force which will be made up of 10 members nominated by the body's regional confederations and which will be headed by a person from outside of the sport. World football's governing body has been in crisis since May, when 9 soccer officials and 5 marketing executives were charged by the United States Justice Department in an indictment that outlined massive corruption, including bribes and kickbacks of more than $150 million over a 24-year period. Jeremy Moggy, National EMTV Sports.
Over to cricket. In the shortest innings in Test history, Stuart Broad took 8 wickets as England ripped out shell-shocked Australia for 60 in an extraordinary and dramatic start to the 4th Ashes Test at Trent Bridge, Nottingham. Yesterday, the hosts 2-1 in the series without their leading bowler James Anderson needed only 18.3 overs to dismiss the touring side, who collapsed to their joint 6th lowest Ashes total in just over 90 minutes.
With England winning the toss and sending Australia in to bat first, Stuart Broad wasted no time and ripped through the Australian top order and grabbed 5 wickets in his first 4 overs. In the process, he claimed his 300th wicket in his 3rd ball of the morning, with his victim opener Chris Rogers caught at first slip by Cook for a duck. Being bowled out in just 18.3 overs, Stuart Broad tore the heart out of Australia with figures of 8 for 15 that included the equal fastest 5-wicket haul of all time. Clark survived 25 minutes for his 10 runs before he drove loosely at a ball from Broad and was caught well above his head by Cook. By the end of the day, they had more than quadrupled Australia's total to be 4 for 274, with superstar batsman Joe Root celebrating an unbeaten and spectacular 124. Broad, playing his 83rd Test, became the 5th England bowler to take 300 wickets after fellow pacemen Anderson, Ian Botham, Bob Willis and Fred Truman. Dion Combang, National EMTV Sports.
Over to boxing. Undefeated welterweight champion Floyd Mayweather Jr. announced his upcoming September 12th fight against Haitian-American Andre Berto in Los Angeles yesterday. Berto, who has lost 3 of his last 6 fights, was confident going up against the elusive Mayweather, rated as one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time. Floyd Money Mayweather will put his unbeaten record on the line in what could be the final fight of his boxing career. Mayweather, who beat Manny Pacquiao in May in what was billed as the fight of the century, will risk his WBC and WBA welterweight titles against the power-punching 2-time welterweight world champion Berto at the MGM Grand. The victory for Mayweather would match the record of the late heavyweight champion Rocky Marciano with an unblemished record of 49-0.
You know, still wise, still witty, but you know, boxing is a young man's sport.
Well, True Guy Sports wraps up on that note. The weather details for the next 24 hours when we come back. Stay tuned.
True Guy Sports.
And now we take a look at the weather forecast for the next 24 hours. In southern region, all centres relatively fine. In Momase, mostly fine, expected in Lae and Madang. In the New Guinea Islands, cloudy periods with patches of rain expected in Kavieng, Kokopo and Lorengau. And lastly, in the Highlands region, all centres, fine weather, then morning fog. Now, recapping our top stories again before we go. Treasury says there will be no cuts to health and education. Also, Manam ashfall resumes after a quiet week, and the success of a backyard Taekwondo club in East New Britain. Well, Well, that wraps up the bulletin for tonight. From the entire news crew, I'm Tokana Hasavi Jr. Thanks for your company. You have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Good night.